But New York, again like any modern commercial and industrial city, has its less attractive areas. Traditionally, the district where live the poorer people, as well as the newly arrived immigrants. The human story is a familiar chapter in the epic of America. Here have lived the people whose hands built the city's subways, its bridges and its skyscrapers. Its tenements and crowded streets magnify all the problems of big city life.
We have a pretty good picture of the household profile of the class of 41 graduates. Their families were overwhelmingly lower and middle class. A little over half of the boys came from what was then lower income backgrounds in the late 1930s. 45% were middle class, although it's worth keeping in mind that all income and wealth brackets were greatly depressed during that very difficult era. Only a couple were from upper income households, and even then, just barely. At least half of the boys' working parents were in blue-collar professions. Their fathers worked as railroad engineers, machine operators, bus conductors, building watchmen, firemen, etc. Interestingly, most didn't come from very large families. The average household size of that class was just over 5 family members, which for some also includes a grandparent or two living under the same roof. Only a quarter of the families owned their own homes, while the vast majority rented. Similar to today, there was a meaningful number of boys from migrant households. At least 40 members of the class of 1941 had one or both parents who were born outside of the United States. While those parents were predominantly from Ireland, there were also others who had arrived from Italy, Switzerland, Australia, England, Germany, and Malta. Matthew Dulligan was a typical Regis kid back then.
They were poor. They spent all their lives in apartments in the city. For the first several years, they lived in boarding house apartments, usually either the top floor or the basement, because those were less expensive. But when my father talks about the times, he didn't talk about the sense of being poor. Everyone in the neighborhood was in a similar situation and went to the same parish, had the same friends, played in the same stickball teams in the street.
Alan Cameron lived only a couple blocks from Matthew.
He grew up in the Bronx. His real mother, actually passed away, I believe, when he was 2 or even less than that. My impression is that she had a cancer that was discovered while she was pregnant and decided to not terminate the pregnancy in order to treat the cancer, and then as a result passed because of it. Grandfather didn't remarry for a while, and so my father was actually sent to Ireland to live with my grandmother's family for I think he was like 1 to 4. And then when my grandfather finally remarried, he was brought back to New York. He always talks about how he avoided the Great Depression and all the suffering that came with it because his father maintained a job in the electric company. I guess he was privileged in that sense. A few other stories. I know he told me that he bought his mother a gun once for her birthday or for Christmas, and it was immediately given back to him.
Even though those graduates had the benefit of a full Regis scholarship, finding work was hardly optional.
We have lots and lots of examples of boys leaving Regis because they got a job. That was especially true during the Depression. So you would have had boys who were in high school, but the family's financial situation was difficult, desperate, and they would have to give up their high school education. It was not uncommon for guys to work after school to help. And this was far beyond just giving themselves spending money for their family's needs.
Had to also work He worked in a bowling alley for much of his high school, which he did not like. So did his brother Roger. And so he didn't have a huge amount of time for extracurricular activities.
Of course, went to Regis, worked in high school both for a butcher up in the Bronx and learned butchering. He was still the one who could carve and find the vein and split the shank and do it cleanly. And also worked for a freight company down lower end of Manhattan. In that time, it was just the presumption that if you could get work, you took it.